Good evening, dear listener. As the fire crackles beside us and the night wraps the room in stillness, I want to share with you a story that echoes across decades, a story that began with injustice but ended with something far greater. A story that might just change the way you see silence, sacrifice, and second chances. Let me ask you, what if a promise whispered in the rain became the spark that unraveled a lie buried for over 20 years? It was 1999, and in the heart of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 12-year-old Naomi Porter walked home from school holding a bright yellow umbrella her mama had bought her for her birthday. She walked the same route every day, past the old corner store, across Railroad Avenue, then down the stretch of cracked sidewalk behind the textile factory. She was smart, quiet. Her teachers said she'd go far if she just stayed focused, but not everyone wanted to see her go far. That afternoon, as the rain beat down and thunder rolled low, Naomi vanished. Just gone. The police report said she must have run away. They said kids like Naomi sometimes did that. But anyone who knew her, especially her best friend, a shy 13-year-old boy named Darren Ross, knew that wasn't true. She never even missed a homework assignment. Darren told the police he'd seen a van that afternoon, dark green with a cracked taillight, pull onto the sidewalk near Naomi. He saw the back door open. He saw Naomi drop her umbrella. But no one believed him. They called it imagination, said he was confused. By the time they did look for the van, it was too late. The umbrella was the only thing left behind. Naomi's mother kept it for years, hanging from the hook in her front hallway, like a question no one could answer. And Darren, he never stopped seeing that van in his dreams. 24 years passed. Darren moved north, changed his name, went to college, worked in non-profit housing across the Midwest. He tried to forget, but Baton Rouge never left him. He never went back until the summer of 2023, when a letter arrived. It was handwritten, no return address, just 5 words on the front. She's still waiting for you. Inside was a newspaper clipping. A local zoning proposal had been overturned due to contamination found beneath the old textile factory. The article included a photo of the site, fenced off now with a line of yellow tape and something else in the background. Something Darren hadn't seen in 24 years. A bright yellow umbrella. Darren sat frozen at his kitchen table in Chicago, staring at the clipping for nearly an hour. The umbrella in the photo wasn't just similar, it was identical. Same curved wooden handle, same worn fabric with a tear near the edge. He remembered that tear like it was yesterday. Naomi had tripped on a root in the schoolyard the day she got it, and they'd laughed until their stomachs hurt. But the umbrella wasn't what chilled him to the bone. It was where it had been found. The article mentioned that the site, once part of the textile factory grounds, had been condemned. Beneath it, buried under concrete and decades of silence, was a large steel storage tank no one had known existed. Inside, they had found bones, unidentified, unmatched. unspoken about. The article said, pending forensic analysis, and then moved on to zoning impact. But Darren couldn't move on. Something deep in him shifted. Something he'd buried years ago, alongside the truth. He booked a ticket that night. When he stepped off the bus in Baton Rouge, it felt like the air itself had weight. The streets hadn't changed much. The storefronts were faded, but the same graffiti lingered on brick walls. The same broken streetlights still buzzed above the corner of Main and Fenner. And the umbrella, it wasn't in evidence. It had been discarded again, dumped in a pile of debris outside the chain-link fence around the factory site. He found it at dawn the next morning, soaked from a recent rain, its handle split, but still intact. He held it to his chest. For the first time in over 2 decades, Darren allowed himself to weep. He needed help, so he visited the only person he thought might still believe him, Pastor Rayfield. The pastor had been a young associate minister at St. Mark's back in the day. Now in his 70s, he ran a community food kitchen and looked at Darren like he'd seen a ghost. "Son," he said after Darren told him everything, "I remember you. And I remember Naomi. I always believed you." Darren's voice cracked. No one did. People were afraid of who owned that van, afraid of what that factory meant to this town. They didn't want trouble, so they chose silence. Pastor Rayfield stood, his voice firm. But God didn't choose silence. He pulled out a dusty file folder. Inside were copies of old neighborhood complaints, letters Naomi's mother had written to city officials, even a journal entry Pastor Rayfield had made the day after Naomi disappeared. "I kept this," he said, "in case someone like you ever came back." That night, Darren couldn't sleep. He walked the old factory site alone, clutching Naomi's umbrella like a relic. Flashlight in hand, he scanned the overgrown edges of the fence until he saw it, something glinting in the dirt near the rusted gate. A bracelet, beaded, pink, and white. The kind Naomi used to make in class and give away like candy. He dropped to his knees. It was hers. He remembered it. The one with the broken clasp. It was like time had stopped, like she had waited, frozen in that forgotten ground until someone finally returned to carry the truth home. And then, just as he stood, the wind shifted and he heard it, a single chime, faint, like the sound of a bell on a bicycle. He turned, expecting someone, anyone. But the street was empty, the sky silent. Yet deep in his chest, something stirred. He whispered aloud, "Naomi, I'm here." The following morning, Darren walked into the East Baton Rouge Police Department and asked to speak with someone about a cold case. He didn't mention Naomi at first. He simply said, 1999 Railroad Avenue. A missing girl. I have new evidence. They directed him to a detective named Valerie Cruz. Young, sharp-eyed, with a reputation for solving things others gave up on. She listened quietly as Darren explained everything: the van, the umbrella, the bracelet he found, the news clipping, and the letter he received with no return address. She took notes but didn't interrupt. Then, when he showed her the photo of Naomi and the matching bracelet, she looked up. "You said Naomi Porter?" Darren nodded. She turned her laptop around and pulled up a digital case archive. Her file was flagged last month. The DNA from the bones found under the textile site matched a partial from a long-cold missing person case. Female, African American, likely underage. It wasn't conclusive without family verification, but "I can get you that," Darren said quickly. "Her mother's still alive. Her name's Lucinda. She still lives on Court Street." Detective Cruz nodded, her expression suddenly heavier. "She passed away 3 weeks ago. Heart failure. No next of kin on file." Darren's heart dropped. He'd been too late to give her peace. Too late to say, "You were right. She never ran away." But fate wasn't done just yet. That night, Pastor Rayfield called him. "There's something you need to see," the pastor said. He led Darren into the back of the church office and pulled out an old VHS tape. "Your friend's mother came here every Sunday for years. After services, she'd sit in this very room and record a message to Naomi, just in case she ever came home. She asked me to keep them. I never watched them. But maybe you should." The tape clicked into the old TV. The screen flickered, and there she was, Lucinda Porter. Older, softer, grief-aged, but with the same fierce eyes as always. She looked into the camera and said, "Baby girl, if you ever find this, I want you to know I never stopped looking. I never stopped lighting candles. They said you left, but I knew. I knew. And if anyone sees this, please don't forget her." Darren turned to the pastor. "Can I keep this?" "You better," Rayfield said. "The world needs to see it." The next morning, Darren uploaded the video, along with the bracelet, the clipping, the story, in a single, heartfelt post. He didn't expect what came next. Within 48 hours, the post went viral. Dozens of locals came forward, some with photos of the factory in the late 90s, some with memories of Naomi, some even remembering the green van. But one message stood out. A former factory employee, anonymous, said he saw something that day, said he was told to stay quiet, said the company had paid hush money to keep things buried, literally and legally. Darren sent it all to Detective Cruz. This time, the police didn't wait. They reopened the case officially. Naomi Porter's name was back in the headlines. This time, not as a runaway, not as a footnote, but as a victim of a crime, a cover-up, and a silence that had lasted far too long. And Darren, he found himself on national news. People called him a hero, but he refused. "I'm not the story," he said in every interview. "Naomi is. Her mother is. This is about truth and the God who doesn't forget the forgotten." He ended every interview the same way. "If you think no one sees you, you're wrong. Heaven is watching, and justice might take time, but it never sleeps. 2 weeks after Naomi's case reopened, the excavation at the old textile site resumed. This time, it wasn't about zoning or development. It was about answers. Under the eyes of forensic teams and press cameras, the remains of a child were officially confirmed to be Naomi Porter. The final match came from an old-school hairbrush her mother had preserved in a sealed box. The DNA didn't lie. The city held a press conference. The mayor apologized publicly to the Porter family, posthumously, and called the case a tragic failure of accountability. But for Darren, no words could fix what had been taken. That night, he returned to Naomi's old street. Everything had changed. Except one thing. The street light above the sidewalk where she used to walk home still flickered the same way it had in 1999. He stood there with the umbrella, now repaired with careful stitches and a new handle, and waited. For what? He didn't know. Maybe just to feel her presence. Maybe to pray. Maybe to say goodbye. As he turned to leave, a small voice called out from the porch behind him. "Mister, are you Darren?" He turned. A girl, maybe 11, stood barefoot in the doorway of Naomi's childhood home. "Yes," he said cautiously. "My mama said, if you came back, to give you this." She handed him a letter sealed in an envelope, old and creased. Inside was a handwritten note in Lucinda Porter's careful script. "If you're reading this, then you did what no one else would. You believed in my baby. You found the truth, and you brought her home. I knew someone would. I prayed for it every night. Thank you for being the answer. Tell her I'm with her now. Tell her I never stopped waiting." Darren folded the letter slowly. He didn't cry this time. He just looked up at the sky and whispered, "I told you I'd come back." The city of Baton Rouge later voted to rename the small park near the factory site. It became Naomi Porter Memorial Garden, a place for remembrance, a place for justice. Darren was invited to speak at the dedication. He stood before the crowd, the yellow umbrella beside him, and told Naomi's story, not as a mystery, but as a mirror. A lot of people failed her, he said, because of who she was, where she came from, and the systems that were supposed to protect her, but didn't. But God didn't fail her. He waited with her. He waited for someone to come back, and when it was time, he lit the path. He paused, then added, "If your heart is still beating, it's not too late to go back for someone." A few weeks later, Darren returned to Chicago. He started a non-profit in Naomi's name, the Yellow Umbrella Foundation, to advocate for cold cases, especially those involving girls of color who were too often forgotten. He wasn't a preacher. He wasn't a hero. He was just someone who remembered and chose not to stay silent. Spring came gently to Baton Rouge. The Naomi Porter Memorial Garden was blooming. Sunflowers, violets, and a single patch of yellow tulips planted beside a bronze plaque that read, "She walked home in the rain, but heaven walked her all the way home." And just below that, in smaller letters, "Justice doesn't expire." Darren visited the garden again that April. He stood beneath the tree they had planted in her memory and watched a group of middle school kids on a field trip gather near the marker. One of them pointed at the umbrella sculpture beside the bench and said, "Who was she?" And a teacher, a local woman with kind eyes, answered, "She was someone they tried to forget, but someone else loved her enough to come back." Darren turned and walked away quietly. That was enough. Later that year, on the anniversary of Naomi's disappearance, a package arrived at Darren's door in Chicago. No return label, just his name, typed neatly. Inside was a single item, a wind chime. Handmade, metal, wood, and 5 yellow beads strung along the center line. No note, no explanation, just a quiet sound when the breeze hit it. A sound that matched the chime he heard that night at the fence. He hung it by his window, and every time it rang, he whispered, "I still remember." Conclusion. And so, dear listener, if this story moved you, let it leave a mark deeper than a tear. Let it remind you that silence can be a cage, or it can be broken. That truth may sleep for a season, but it always rises. That sometimes faith doesn't roar, it just waits with the umbrella in the rain, hoping someone will come back. Naomi waited. Darren remembered. And justice, though delayed, did not forget. Because when one person refuses to stay silent, the whole world can change. If the story touched your heart and would like to listen to more like it, you know where to find us.